Greetings viewers, Eric the Car Guy, also known as ETCG1, when posting videos to, yeah that's right, this channel. If it's your birthday, happy birthday. Happy birthday to you. All right, today's topic sort of stems from the sponsored video I recently did with UTI. And by the way, both Humble Mechanic and Bogey are also producing videos from that, and there will be other videos released from that series of our roundtable discussion. And I believe Humble Mechanic has also put the whole thing into a podcast, which I will link all that down in the description for you to check out, and when it becomes available. So not everybody's video may be out, but as they become available, I'll put that out for you. Now we've got that business out of the way, let's talk a little bit about what you wanted to be when you grew up. And I read through a lot of those comments, and there was a lot of back and forth, a lot of dialogue in that video that I really enjoyed. I like the interaction that I have with you. I like hearing your stories. I like learning about you. Now, I may not be able to respond to everybody's comments. There are sometimes thousands of comments. I try to respond to as many as I can, and those that I don't respond to, I may just either like them or just have read them. So just know that I am listening and I'm not ignoring you. I got a lot of just interesting stories from you, especially those people in the field that have been working for a while, and some of you, well, are a little disheartened by the whole process and the career path that you've taken, and some people are like, yeah, you can make a living and you can do well. So there's a little bit of column A, a little bit of column B, I guess, that's there. My experience, unfortunately, was a negative one. Hence the reason I went off on my own and then started a YouTube channel. So I went off on my own before I started the YouTube channel, and then I started the YouTube channel, and well, here we are. And I'm very grateful for all of you viewers out there that helped me get to where I am today. Thank you. So what did I want to be when I grew up? I never saw myself being a YouTuber. It's that job description did not even exist when I was a kid. And I want you to think about that when you say what you want to be when you grow up, because the job that you might end up with, or career or occupation, whatever you want to call it, may not exist today. Think about that. So what you wish for now may not be there in the future, or you may not even realize that it's going to be there, such as myself. When I was a kid, I wanted to be, well, two things come to mind as far as what I wanted to be. The first was a doctor. And more specifically, I wanted to be a doctor that delivered babies. And the reason for that is because I figured most doctors were always giving people bad news. Oh, you got some terminal disease, you only got a few weeks to live, sorry about that, buddy. But to me, my perspective at that time, we're talking like, 7, 8 years old, I thought I'd be giving people good news. Here's your baby. You can be happy about that. Well, I've gotten older and I've had a few kids myself, and I realized that, yeah, that's sort of a mixed bag of emotions that you sometimes get, and well, it's a lot more complicated than I distilled it down to be, not to mention the cost of medical school and then specializing in being, OBGYN stuff. But I also had one other thought, and that was to be an oceanographer. I loved sea creatures. I loved stuff. The books in the library, I went and I got them out. I checked them out, all about fish, all about whales, and I just love the ocean, in particular the Pacific Ocean. For some reason, I had a bias to the Pacific over the Atlantic. The Atlantic seemed dark and foreboding to me for whatever reason, and the Pacific always seemed, tropical and had all the cool stuff. I don't know why that was, but that's what was in my head. In fact, the first time I ever went out to California, I visited San Diego, and I just about lost my stuff when I saw a tide pool for the first time, a real live tide pool, not something that was at some aquarium or whatever, but a real live tide pool, and being able to see starred fish and sea anemones and all those little creatures that lived in there. I was geeking out. I absolutely love that stuff, and that's something I actually share with Chris Fix, who also I think even went to school for oceanography. In fact, you can call him Chris Fish. Don't tell him I said that. For some reason, fish always fascinated me, or just the ocean in general and those ecosystems and all that kind of stuff. And before I got to this point, I had a lot of different jobs. I used to bag groceries. I used to make fake trees for like shopping malls and things like that. I think I've mentioned that before. I did pursue the art thing for a little while, but then, which I don't know if I mentioned that, but the other thing I ended up being or wanting to be when I got to that age was an artist. I showed an aptitude for it in school, and I just figured that's the way I would go because that's what I was good at. Well, I came to find out that probably the best that I could do was to be an art teacher or do greeting cards and stuff like that. Those things where there's like the famous artist that makes millions of dollars every time he paints something, throws paint on a canvas, whatever. it just doesn't exist. I mean, basically, if you're an artist, your stuff is really worth something after you're dead because people can't get it anymore. So it's some kind of weird supply-demand thing. And also, I've come to learn that the art world is something of a way of laundering money, and we're not going to get into that here. Anyway, I discovered that art was not necessarily the career for me. But I always had a love of movies, in particular scary movies and science fiction movies. So I thought, hey, why don't I see if I can get into special effects, which I moved to Pittsburgh and went to the Art Institute of Pittsburgh to enroll in the industrial design program to learn special effects makeup and model making and all that stuff. In fact, I would say that's the genesis of my love for fabrication today, because one of the things I've come to find that really gets me excited in this time in my life is taking an idea and turning it into reality. I just love that. And the Fairmont is sort of, you know, a product of that. It's having an idea and then saying, okay, bring it into the world, which is a little more difficult than, you know, it is to think up. But I just love thinking around those engineering challenges. And a lot of that started when I was in industrial design school, having to come up with rendering a drawing and then trying to think it through and, you know, trying to come up with how to make it actually work. Absolutely love that stuff. And if I were to have a job now and I didn't have YouTube, I would probably go to school for welding and get into fabrication. I don't know if I would go back to being an auto mechanic. Not that I wouldn't do it, but like I said, I enjoy building things. I enjoy creating things, and that's where the art stuff came from. My point in mentioning all this is I'm sharing my story with you because it's my show, but the point in mentioning all this is I started out with one idea in my head and I ended up someplace completely different. As I said, my quote-unquote occupation didn't even exist at the time I was thinking about what I would do when I grew up. And I'm just kind of curious, based on the feedback that I got from that previous video that I mentioned earlier and everything else. I mean, what did you see yourself as a mechanic, you know, growing up, and that's what you aspired to be? Or was there something else? Me, I hate to say it, but I mean, I settled for being an auto mechanic because the reason, well, I couldn't finish the school for industrial design because I ran out of money. My parents were not helping me anymore. I wasn't 24 years old yet, so I wasn't eligible to get loans on my own. I was kind of set adrift. That was the fake trees and working at fast food joints and all that kind of stuff to make ends meet that happened after that. And then finally I said to myself, all right, I need a career, not another job. And I opened up the phone book and found Rosedale Technical Institute. I was living in Pittsburgh at the time, and I could become an auto mechanic in 18 months. Well, I'd always been tinkering with my cars and my bikes and all these kinds of things. I figured 18 months, they could get me through, and I could be out there looking for a real job, not another fast food gig or something like that. And in that respect, auto mechanics paid off in spades for me because graduated top of my class. I like saying that, but the truth of the matter is, there were, I think, maybe 10 or 15 other people in that class, so to be fair, my graduating class was very small. All that said, I came to auto mechanics as something that I could do, not something that I aspired to do when I was young. I never thought to myself, hey, one day I want to be a mechanic. I ended up being a mechanic. Is that the same true? Is that also true for you, either being a mechanic or in the career that you're in? Did you think that you were going to be one thing or aspire to be one thing and ended up being another thing? I mean, what's your story? I guess that's the whole purpose of this video. I've shared with you my story. I'm going to cut it here, but I would like to hear from you and what your thoughts are on where you were when you were a kid and what you thought you were going to be and where you ended up. And are you a young person now looking to get into whatever? I'm curious as to what the feedback is that I will get from you. But I'll link in the description the video that I previously mentioned, also the other information that I mentioned from Homo Mechanic and Bogey. So you can check all that stuff out for yourself. I will also link in the description ericthecarguy.com, which is where I ask you go if you have automotive questions. Aside from that, please comment, like, subscribe, and do all those things that help me make a living here. I really appreciate all that. Be safe, have fun, stay dirty, and I will see you next Monday. Well, whenever it is that you're watching this video, but I post ETCG1 videos on Mondays. See you then.